My family flew to Rome without me. My mom's caption read, "Finally, just the family together." I wasn't mentioned, but my card paid for everything. Then my brother's mistaken text said, "He'll never notice." I replied, "Noticed?" That night, I counseled every booking as fraud. At 5:41 a.m., my phone exploded with 19 missed calls, followed by my dad's message. "Are you serious?" I wasn't looking for drama that day. It was just another Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting in my car on my lunch break, balancing a cheap burrito on my lap and scrolling through my phone. The kind of mindless scrolling you do to survive. The second half of the workday, my world felt quiet, ordinary until one post changed everything. There it was, my mother's profile picture glowing at the top of my feed. She had posted a carousel of photos. The first one made my stomach twist, so violently I almost dropped my food. It was them, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother standing in front of the Colosseum in Rome. The sky was golden, the kind of perfect evening light that travel magazines pay photographers to capture. They looked ecstatic. Matching outfits, arms linked, the picture of a family making memories together. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I misread it. But the next photo was my brother holding a glass of red wine, up toward the camera, his grin wide. The third was my mom, in a floppy hat, tilting her head like she belonged in some Italian postcard. And then came the fourth photo, the one that broke me. My father at a cafe table, espresso in hand, captioning the entire album with words I will never forget. Finally, "Just the family together, Italy." I read it twice, then 3 times, "The family. Just the family." No mention of me, not even a tag in the corner, "So glad you're making time for family. You all look amazing together." I felt like I'd been erased, as if I'd never belonged in those pictures. To begin with, the kind of pain you don't expect from strangers, but from the people who raised you. It was the digital version of being told to my face, "You don't count." In that moment, I thought it couldn't possibly get worse, but I was wrong. Exclusion. And that's when the financial bombshell hit me. At first, I told myself, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a careless caption, a slip of words. But then another memory clawed its way back into my minda. Fraud alert I had brushed aside a few days earlier. A text from my credit card company about unusual travel purchases. I hadn't thought much of it. I assumed it was some automated glitch, maybe a subscription renewal I'd forgotten about. But staring at those photos from Rome, something clicked. My pulse quickened as I opened the banking app. The screen lit up. The truth unfolded like a knife, twisting deeper. 3 round-trip flights from New York to Rome booked under my name. Over $4,000. A 5-night reservation at a luxury hotel in the city center, $6,000. Gone. Private tours of the Vatican and the Colosseum, all charged to me. By the time I added it all together, the total hovered near $15,000. My money, my card, my name, and not one single word to me. I sat frozen, burrito untouched, screen burning into my eyes. It wasn't just the betrayal of being left out. It was the realization that I had unknowingly funded the very trip. That excluded me. They had erased me while making sure I was the one footing the bill. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife even deeper, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from my brother. Only 3 words. "He'll never notice." I knew instantly it wasn't meant for me. My brother had just confessed everything without realizing it. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. They had counted on me being too distracted, too trusting, too loyal to ever look closely. In that moment, a switch flipped inside me. The betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was financial, calculated, cruel. I had been treated not as family, but as an endless ATM, and I wasn't going to stay silent. Not this time, because the next move I made would change everything. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. The moment I saw that message, "He'll never notice," something inside me went cold, almost surgical. I left work early that day. No dramatic exit, no explanations. I drove home, shut the door behind me, and sat at my desk with my laptop, glowing in the dark. My hands didn't shake. My breathing never faltered. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The first thing I pulled up was the airline portal. 3 flights to Rome, confirmation codes neatly displayed under my name. I clicked Report Unauthorized and submitted the claim. Boarding passes, invalid. Next was the hotel 5 nights, in a suite that cost more than half my rent for the year. Cancelled with a single request and tagged as fraud. Then the private tours, Vatican Colosseum, wine tastings, food walks, gone one by one, every ticket shredded digitally. Finally, I froze the entire card, every account tied to it shut down. A new card already on its way. It took me less than half an hour, 30 minutes, to unravel their perfect European vacation. 30 minutes to remind them that the money they leaned on wasn't theirs to begin with. And when it was done, I didn't send a warning. I didn't explain. I simply closed my laptop, went to bed, and let silence carry the message for me. The next morning, my phone erupted before sunrise. Some came from my dad, some from my mom. Not "we're sorry," not "let's talk." No apology, no guilt, just sheer outrage that I had dared to stop them. To them, I hadn't been wrong. Di had broken the script. I was supposed to stay quiet, pay up, and smile while they played the part of a happy family without me. But that script was dead. And as the calls kept pouring in, quiet, withdrawals, unexplained charges, emergencies that never ended, I had cut off the head of the trip. But now I needed to see the body of everything they had taken. That's when I decided to dig deeper. After the storm of calls and messages, the house went quiet. Too quiet. That silence gave me the space to do something I should have done years ago. Look back. At first, it was just curiosity, but the deeper I went, the more sickening the pattern became. Streaming services I never watched. DoorDash orders at restaurants I'd never been to. Gym memberships, cloud storage, clothing subscriptions, all linked to my card, all slipping by unnoticed. Tiny charges that, by themselves, felt harmless. 10 here, 20 there, 50 somewhere else. But they weren't harmless, they were constant. I remembered moments as I stared at the numbers. My sister texting at midnight before an important interview, begging for money to buy a professional outfit. My mom calling in tears about medical bills she couldn't cover. My dad swearing he'd pay me back after an emergency car repair. I had told myself I was helping, that family meant stepping up when things got tough, but scrolling through those statements, I realized these weren't emergencies. They were habits, and I had been financing them all without question. 2 nights passed while I combed through every line, every charge, and every unexplained payment. I built a spreadsheet, cold and clinical, with dates, amounts, and who I knew was responsible, line after line, page after page. When I finally totaled it, the number glared back at me like a verdict. $41,372.86, and that wasn't even counting the Rome trip. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had been living on the other side of it for years, and I had let them, so I made a choice. I wasn't going to call them, wasn't going to argue, wasn't going to explain. Instead, I dragged the file into the family group chat. No message, no caption, just the document titled, "Everything You Never Paid For." Within minutes, I saw it read. One by one, their names lit up beneath the file, and then nothing. No typing bubble, no excuses. Just the heavy silence of people caught without a defense. But silence wasn't enough for me anymore. If they thought I would eventually cave, they were wrong. I wasn't just cutting off one trip I was about to sever every lifeline they had ever tied to me. And that decision would trigger a collapse none of them were ready for. The spreadsheet was only the warning shot. The real strike came after late that night. I sat at my desk again, but this time I didn't scroll through statements. I opened every account they had ever leached from me. One by one, I started shutting the doors they had walked through so easily for years. First went the streaming services Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, the ones my sister bragged about binge-watching, even as she complained she couldn't afford rent. Cancelled. Then the meal kits my mom had somehow been ordering weekly, boxers full of gourmet ingredients I never saw a single bite of. Gone. The iCloud storage plan. Terminated. My sister's gym membership. Cancelled. Even the tiny gas station app my dad used, tied to my card for points. Locked. And finally, the biggest of all the mortgage auto payment, 6 years ago. I had stepped in when my dad lost his job, covering half of the house payment until he could get back on his feet. But he never did. Not fully, and I never stopped. Quietly, my money had kept that roof over their heads. That night, I killed it with one-click dot. Each cancellation felt like cutting a thread in a web that had trapped me for years. By the time I was finished, their entire financial ecosystem collapsed in front of me. They didn't know it yet, but the safety net was gone. It didn't take long for the panic to surface. 4 days later, the group chat flickered back to life. My sister was the first to crack. Is anyone else getting kicked out of Hulu? Why is Spotify asking me to update payment info? Then, a private text from her, can you fix the storage thing? My photos won't back up. I left it unanswered. The next evening, my dad chimed in, look, we can talk about what happened, but you're making things harder than they need to be. Harder, that was the word he chose. Not betrayal, not apologies, just an inconvenience. They still didn't get it. To them, I wasn't a son or a brother. I was infrastructure, a utility, something that only mattered when it broke. And so I doubled down. I didn't send a reply. Instead, I waited, knowing the real fallout hadn't even started, because if they thought losing Netflix was painful, they were about to learn what it meant to lose the life they had built entirely on my back. And that's when I started watching them unravel. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It came in fragments, little cracks that spread until the whole facade started to crumble. I noticed it first on social media. My sister, who once flaunted designer handbags I had unknowingly paid for, began listing them on her Instagram story, lightly used, DM for price. These were the same bags she had begged me to buy her for birthdays, for holidays, for confidence at work. Now they were fire sale items, pawns in her scramble for cash. Then came my mom. She had always paraded jewelry at family gatherings, heirloom pieces she swore she would never part with. One evening, while scrolling a local resale site, I saw her bracelets, her necklaces, her wedding ring quietly listed with vague descriptions like estate downsizing. And my dad, the proud man who once said he'd rather die than work a gig job, I spotted him in the neighborhood one night, headlights glowing on his old sedan. He wasn't just out late, he was delivering takeout bags to strangers' doorsteps. He had signed up for delivery driving, desperate for money he used to claim was beneath him, piece by piece. The empire they'd built on my back was collapsing, and the irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they treated me like the invisible one, the background character. Now, stripped of my support, they were the ones fading into the shadows, forced to claw for survival. But the cracks didn't stop. At embarrassment, they spread deeper, darker. One afternoon, a friend from college texted me out of the blue. Hey, are you really selling your truck? Saw it on Marketplace. My chest tightened. I hadn't listed my truck. I asked for a screenshot, and there, it was my exact make, model, license plate, even the dent on the passenger side door. But the contact number wasn't mine. It was my sister's. She had taken the spare key I left at my parents' house for emergencies, used the garage code, and driven off with my truck while I was away. She was trying to sell it behind my back, cash only, serious buyers only. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just freeloading anymore. This was theft. I pulled up my Ring camera footage, and the evidence was undeniable. 2 nights earlier, 11:26 p.m., hoodie pulled low, sneakers flashing under the porch light. My sister slipping into the garage, taking the key, and driving off. Like a thief in the night. That was when I realized the free fall wasn't just about losing money. It was about losing their sense of boundaries, of morality. They weren't asking anymore, they were taking. And if I didn't draw the line here, they would keep crossing until there was nothing left of me to take. So I made the call. To the police. When I dialed the police, my voice didn't shake. I explained everything clearly. The stolen truck, the spare key, the footage. I gave them her name, her number, even the screenshot of her Marketplace listing. For once, I didn't try to protect her. I didn't soften the truth. Hours later, an officer called back they had located my truck. My sister had driven it to meet a potential buyer, but when he asked to see the title, she froze. She admitted it belonged to me, stammering excuses about how she had permission. But the footage told another story, and the listing was proof of intent. That night, my phone lit up again. Not with apologies, not with explanations, but with a voicemail from her. Her voice was sharp, defensive, like I was the one in the wrong. You're seriously going to get me arrested over a car? You weren't even using it. I was trying to help Mom and Dad cover the mortgage. You'd rather see us fail than share. I replayed that message 3 times. Every word dripped with entitlement, as if stealing from me was somehow noble, as if my silence in the past had given her permission to cross every boundary. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded furious that I had finally stood up to her. The officer told me it was my choice: press charges or let it go. I sat in silence, staring at the paperwork on my desk. Part of me wanted her to feel the cold steel of handcuffs, to see her name on a record, to finally face consequences. Another part of me remembered the girl she used to be, the sister I once bought gifts for, covered bills for, defended when no one else would, in the end. I didn't press charges, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because I wanted the weight of her own actions to crush her without me needing to add the final blow. The only reason she wasn't fingerprinted and booked was because the very person she tried to steal from still had more compassion than she ever showed me. That choice, something shifted. For years, I had been the safety net. Even when they lied, even when they drained me, I still caught them before they hit the ground. This time, I let them feel the fall, and for the first time, the silence that followed wasn't just theirs, it was mine. The next message didn't come from my sister. It came from my father. A voicemail, short and hollow. Just 5 seconds of silence before he whispered, "We messed up." Those 3 words cut deeper than any voicemail my sister had. Left because if he was finally admitting it, I knew something inside their world had cracked beyond repair. And the proof of that crack arrived the very next day in a letter from my mother. The morning after my father's voicemail, an envelope appeared. On my doorstep, no text, no knock, no warning, just a plain white envelope with my name written across the front in my mother's looping cursive, the same handwriting that once signed my school permission slips and birthday cards. I almost didn't open it. Part of me expected manipulation, some carefully crafted guilt trip to lure me back into their orbit. But when I finally slid a finger under the flap and unfolded the pages inside, what I read stopped me cold. It wasn't excuses. It wasn't bargaining. It was confession. She wrote that they had leaned on me for so long they forgot I wasn't obligated, that it had become easier to treat my support as a given, a resource, instead of a choice I made. She admitted she hadn't even recognized herself anymore when she saw the Rome photos online. That smiling woman in the floppy sun hat didn't look like a proud mother. She looked like a thief flaunting stolen goods. There were no demands, no promises of payback, just an acknowledgement that they had hollowed out our relationship until all that remained was transactions, and that somewhere along the line, love had turned into dependency, and dependency had turned into exploitation. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, tracing every curve of her handwriting. For the first time in years, it felt like she was speaking to me. Not at me, but even as the words sank in, I couldn't ignore the doubt that crept through me. I had heard their apologies before thin, temporary, dissolving as soon as the next crisis arrived. Was this any different? Or was it just another strategy, a softer mask to hide the same cycle? I placed the letter on the counter and let it sit there for 2 days, untouched. Every time I walked by, it felt heavier, like the ink carried the weight. Of all the years I'd allowed myself to be their safety net, and yet something had shifted. My father's quiet voicemail, my mother's written confessionate, was the first crack in the wall of entitlement that had stood between us for so long. But words were only the beginning. I needed to see what they did when there was no money left to lean on. Actions, not apologies. Proof, not promises. And that proof came soon enough, not in private, but out in the open when their struggles started spilling into the world for everyone to see. For years, I had been the one patching cracks before anyone else even saw them. This time, I let the cracks widen. And for the first time, I watched my family stumble in full view of the world. It started small. A neighbor mentioned my dad during a grocery run, how he'd seen him fixing gutters and hauling junk for cash. The man who once said, "I'll never be anyone's handyman," was now carrying toolboxes for strangers. He didn't tell me himself. I heard it secondhand, like gossip whispered across a checkout line. Then came my mom. An old family friend messaged me out of nowhere. "I didn't know your mom was working retail now. Saw her at the mall folding shirts." I pictured her under those fluorescent lights, hands sorting stacks of sweaters, the jewelry she once flaunted long gone. And my sister, every update about her came filtered through screenshots. She texted me a photo of a job application at a local clinic, then another of her ride to the interview. No commentary, no sarcasm, just proof. A week later, she sent a single line. I got it. It was strange, almost surreal, seeing them adapt. Without me, they were learning how to stand without leaning on my wallet. But the most jarring part wasn't what they were doing, it was how the outside world began to notice at the grocery store. I ran into Mrs. Callahan, the neighbor who had watched me grow up. She tilted her head, lowered her voice, and asked, "Is your mom doing okay?" I heard about the house. I didn't know what she meant until I went home and checked the county records. There it was, black and white. A pre-foreclosure notice filed publicly. The house that I had quietly kept afloat for years was slipping away, and now it wasn't just their secret, it was everyone's business. That was when I realized the silence I had chosen was louder than anything I could have said. They were unraveling in front of neighbors, coworkers, even strangers. And for once, I wasn't rushing in to hide it. But, as much as I tried to stay detached, a part of me still watched with conflicted eyes. When my sister texted again this time, a screenshot of her first paycheck, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not trust, just the faintest hint of proof that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to feel the weight of what I had carried for years, and that proof would only grow stronger. When the invitation I never expected showed up in my mailboxer, simple envelope, handwritten, inviting me back to the very table I thought I'd left behind. The envelope arrived on a Thursday evening. It wasn't another bill, or a notice, or a letter from the bank. It was smaller, softer hand-addressed in my mother's handwriting. My name curved across the front in the same looping cursive I remembered from childhood birthday cards. I held it in my hands longer than I should have. For a moment, I thought about throwing it straight into the trash. But curiosity won. I tore it open carefully, half expecting another plea for money dressed up as sentiment. Inside was a single piece of stationery, neatly written, no guilt, no bargaining, just an invitation. Dinner at the house, one night only, no strings, just family. That was it. No manipulation, no details about food or money, no hidden agenda. Just dinner. Still, I didn't trust it. For days, the envelope sat on my counter while I debated whether to go. Part of me pictured a trap, a carefully staged performance to lure me back into my old role as provider. Another part of me, smaller but louder than I wanted to, admit if it might be something else, something real. On Sunday evening, I made the drive back to the house I hadn't stepped into since everything fell apart. The streets looked the same, the porch light still flickered the way it always had, but my chest felt heavy as I walked up the steps, each one echoing with years of resentment. The door opened before I could knock. My mom stood there, not in jewelry or makeup, just a simple sweater and tired eyes. She smiled not wide, not forced, just a quiet curve that felt unfamiliar and almost fragile. The dining table was smaller than I remembered. No fancy setups, no extra plates, no show. Just a pot of pasta, a loaf of garlic bread, 3 glasses of water. My dad asked about work. My mom kept the conversation on small, ordinary things. My sister complained about her boss in the way only someone who finally earned their own paycheck could. Not once did they mention money. Not once did they ask for help. And then, when the plates were nearly empty, my dad reached into his jacket and slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. His handwriting was blocky, uneven. At the top, it read, "We will never use your name or card again. Not because you cut us off, because we finally understand what we were taking." Beneath it were 3 signatures. His, my mom's, my sister's, no theatrics, no pleading. Just acknowledgement. I tucked the paper into my pocket and left after. Hugs that were short and real, not staged, for the first time in years. I walked out of that house without feeling lighter from having spent money, but from something else. From finally being seen. In that night, sitting in my car outside the old house, I realized this wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries. The question was, could those boundaries hold? When I sat alone in my car after that dinner, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no rush of victory, no sense of payback. What I felt was quieter, heavier, like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind the wreckage, but also a strange, fragile calm. For years, I thought my silence made me weak, that if I didn't shout, argue, or demand respect, I'd never be heard. But that night, holding the folded paper with their 3 signatures, I realized my silence had done more than words ever could. It had forced them to hear the echo of their own choices. They had called me selfish, immature, even cruel when I finally cut them off. But boundaries aren't cruelty. Boundaries are clarity. They are the line that says, this is where I end, and you begin. For too long, I let kindness bleed into permission. I told myself I was just being supportive. That family meant sacrifice, even when it meant sacrificing myself. But the truth is, every time I said yes out of guilt, I was teaching them that yes was the only answer they deserved. Are different. I still reply to their messages, still answer the phone when they call, but I don't reach for my wallet. I don't carry their burdens before they even feel the weight of them. I am their son, their brother, not their bank. And in a strange way, I think they finally see me now, not as a background character, not as the invisible provider, but as a person with limits, with a life of his own. The lesson I learned wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming myself, about realizing that the most powerful thing you can do sometimes isn't to shout louder, it's to step back, go silent, and let the walls shake from the emptiness you leave behind. Because in that silence, they finally learned the difference between love and dependence. And I finally learned the difference between being kind and being used. And that truth carried me into the ending of this story. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a kind of freedom I didn't know I'd been missing. In the end, I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by walking away, by drawing a line that could no longer be crossed. Family may bend you, even break you. But the moment you stop letting kindness be mistaken for weakness, that's the moment you finally set yourself free. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful family drama stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive.